Somewhere in the mountains of southwest China, a crew needed to build 3 transmission towers on a cliff face that no truck could reach. No road ran to the site. No crane could be assembled up there either. There was nowhere flat enough, and nothing strong enough underneath it. Cutting a path through would have meant tearing through a protected forest that elephants still migrate across. Then 16 heavy drones rose from below, carrying steel and concrete straight up the cliff face, as if the mountain had simply stopped mattering. In 3 days, that fleet moved 180 tons of building material through the air. So is this what it looks like? Drones turning into flying cranes? And why does the United States suddenly look stuck on the ground while this is happening? Now here is the part of this story that has already gone viral, and the part that is actually wrong. The version spreading online shows clips that make it look like China has built drones strong enough to grab an entire assembled tower crane and fly it across a construction site like a toy helicopter. Counterweight, base, boom, and all. That is not what is happening. A fully assembled tower crane weighs far more than any drone on Earth could lift. Nobody is doing that. What China is actually doing is something quieter, and in some ways, more disruptive to the entire construction industry than the fake version ever could be. It is not replacing the crane. It is replacing the reason you needed a road to reach the crane in the first place. Here is how that actually works, and why the answer to that second question is more complicated than a simple yes or no. For most of construction history, the hardest part of a project was never the building itself. It was reaching the place where the building needed to exist. A transmission tower in the mountains needs a road for trucks. A remote power line needs a crew willing to climb dangerous terrain by hand. A protected forest forces engineers into an impossible choice: build slowly or damage land that should not be touched. Heavy lift drones attack that problem before it ever becomes a road, a cableway, or a month of ground preparation. If the materials can simply fly to the exact point where they are needed, how much of that old process, the surveying, the road crews, the months of setup, even needs to happen at all? These are not the camera drones you might be picturing. The machines doing this work are built specifically for industrial loads. One is the Sichuan-built Skytech S400, designed for power grid construction, with multiple rotors and a cargo capacity measured in hundreds of kilograms. Another is a coaxial unmanned helicopter that keeps lifting power even at high altitude, where thin air weakens most aircraft. Then there is DJI's FlyCart 100, a cargo drone with a winch system that lowers material with controlled precision instead of forcing workers underneath to catch something heavy falling from above. That winch detail matters more than it sounds. A regular delivery drone moves something from one landing point to another. A construction drone has to do something much harder. It has to carry a load to a precise location, hold itself steady in the wind, lower the load safely, and release it without swinging it into a worker, a power line, or the rock face itself. That is the moment a drone stops being a delivery vehicle and starts acting like a small crane that happens to fly. And once a fleet of them can repeat that motion all day, every day, what happens to the mountain itself? It stops being a barrier. It becomes a coordinate. This is not a single demo for the cameras. It has already happened in at least 3 very different parts of China, solving 3 very different problems. The first was in Yunnan province, in Sichu County, where limestone cliffs and protected rainforest made a normal access road nearly impossible to build. And the land also sat inside a known migration corridor for Asian elephants. A traditional approach there could have meant weeks of ground disturbance just to get equipment into position. So what happens when the road is no longer the first machine that has to show up on site? China sent 16 drones instead. Across 3 days, they moved that 180 tons of steel and concrete to the tower locations with tight positioning control. Here is the detail that matters more than the tonnage. The forest never had to be opened up for trucks. A heavy cableway never had to be built first. The land below stayed almost completely untouched. A year later, a different problem showed up in Xinjiang, where a crew needed to service a transmission tower across a rough river and an unstable slope. In the old method, workers would carry tools and rigging equipment by hand over that dangerous ground, with the one-way trip alone taking hours. A FlyCart 100 completed the same tool transfer in 2 flights. The full delivery was finished in under 30 minutes. The time saved was large. But the safety change mattered more. The drone removed the exact part of the job where a worker was most likely to get hurt. And once a machine can take that worst part of the walk away from the worker entirely, why would anyone keep sending the worker there first? Then came a different kind of problem entirely in Hubei during a winter freeze. Ice had built up on transmission lines, turning routine maintenance into something genuinely dangerous. Extra weight on the wires, crews working near frozen steel, and live high-voltage systems in brutal weather. China used drones to keep people away from the danger point itself. One drone carried controlled heat to melt the ice. Another used a suspended beam to knock ice loose from the line. It looked unusual on camera, but the logic behind it was simple. Put the machine where the danger is. Keep the humans somewhere else. 3 different provinces, 3 completely different problems, and the same pattern shows up every single time. The drone does not replace every worker or every machine on a job site. It removes the worst part of the job. In Yunnan, it protected the forest. In Xinjiang, it removed the dangerous river and mountain carry. In Hubei, it kept crews away from live ice-covered wires. That pattern is the real story here, not the drones themselves. The fact that China has already started plugging them into the boring, expensive, and dangerous parts of infrastructure work that nobody ever puts in a highlight reel. And that is exactly where America's side of this story gets uncomfortable. Here is the part most people get wrong when they talk about this. The United States was not late to heavy-lift autonomous flight. It had a working version of this years before Chinese construction drones ever went viral. It was called the K-MAX. Built by Common Aerospace, it was an unmanned cargo helicopter deployed by the US Marine Corps in Afghanistan starting in 2011. Built to fly supply runs into combat outposts that trucks could not safely reach. Over roughly 3 years, 2 unmanned K-MAX helicopters flew more than 1,000 missions and delivered upward of 4.5 million pounds of cargo. They flew mostly at night, replacing the equivalent of 900 resupply convoys and removing an estimated 46,000 hours of human exposure to roadside bombs and ambushes. The capability was real. The proof was real. So what happened to it? This is where the story gets more complicated than a simple "China is ahead" headline, and more interesting too. The Marine Corps brought the K-MAX home in 2014 once the immediate need in Afghanistan eased, and for a few years, its future as a permanent military program was genuinely uncertain. But the aircraft did not vanish. Common kept building it. Production paused, then restarted in 2015 to meet a wave of demand from logging, firefighting, and industrial transport companies who wanted the manned version for exactly the kind of remote heavy lift work it had already proven it could do. By 2023, after that second production run, 90 K-MAX helicopters had been built in total. So the honest version of this story is not that America built something brilliant and let it rot. It is that America built something brilliant, proved it worked in the hardest environment imaginable, and then let it stay a specialty tool, used by a relatively small number of operators in a relatively small number of industries, instead of becoming the foundation of a nationwide construction and utility system. China took a different path entirely. Instead of relying on one large expensive aircraft for rare missions, it pushed smaller, cheaper heavy-lift drones into repeated civilian work across its power grid, fast, at scale, on a normal Tuesday, not just during a war. One side had a remarkable machine. The other side built a market and a system around the mission. If the machines are not really the gap anymore, what is? Remember those 2 old unmanned K-MAX aircraft, the ones that flew combat resupply over Afghanistan, then sat mostly idle for years, while a small number of manned versions quietly kept working in logging and firefighting? The Marine Corps pulled them back out of storage, not to fly the same old missions again, but to test new autonomy software on a frame that had already proven it could do the job. That single decision tells you almost everything about where the real gap actually sits. It is not that America forgot how to build the machine. It is that for over a decade, almost nobody built the system of rules around the machine that would let 100 of them fly at once, every day, without a human filing paperwork for each individual flight. The honest answer is regulation. And this part of the story has actually shifted very recently, in a way that makes it more interesting, not less. For years, heavy drones in the United States ran into a genuinely difficult approval pathway. Anything that needed to fly beyond the operator's direct line of sight required individual waivers and exemptions, handled one at a time, which made it extremely hard for companies to build experience or prove demand at scale. In China, drone airspace was treated more like a new layer of national infrastructure from the start. Licensing, flight corridors, and city planning were being built together, rather than waiting on one small pilot program at a time. Shenzhen had already pushed drone logistics corridors into regular daily use, while other Chinese cities began planning physical space for drone traffic the same way older cities once planned for roads and parking. But here's the update that most retellings of this story miss. In 2025, the United States moved. In June, the White House issued an executive order explicitly aimed at what it called unleashing American drone dominance. By August, the FAA had published a major proposed rule, known as Part 108, designed to finally create a clear, repeatable, nationwide pathway for beyond line-of-sight drone flights, instead of the old one-at-a-time waiver system. The Transportation Secretary's own words when announcing it were blunt, that the goal was for America, not China, to lead this technology going forward. So the race is not actually over. It has just become a race about who finishes building the rulebook first, rather than who built the most impressive machine first. China's National Health and Civil Aviation Framework has also kept moving in the same period, formally folding drone airworthiness certification into National Civil Aviation Law in late 2025, placing it closer to international standards used by European regulators as well. Both countries are now writing the rules in real time, which means the next 2 or 3 years, not the last 5, may end up being the years that actually decide who controls this part of the sky. Here is the part of this story I am not going to oversell. Heavy lift drones are nowhere close to replacing the crane standing on a skyscraper site downtown. And the strongest version of this story is the honest one, not the exaggerated one. Battery life remains a genuine constraint on longer missions. Strong wind can turn a controlled lift into a hazard almost instantly. High altitude reduces how much weight a drone can safely carry, because thinner air means less lift. Power lines themselves can create electromagnetic interference that complicates precise flight near the very towers these drones are meant to service. A drone carrying 100 kilograms is simply not the same category of machine as a crane lifting a multi-ton structural module for a high-rise. So does that mean the viral comparison was pointless from the start? Not exactly, because that comparison was never really the point. These machines do not need to replace every crane in the world to matter. They only need to remove the road that was never going to get built anyway. The dangerous climb a worker shouldn't have had to make. The cableway that would have taken a month to install before the real work even started. Once that becomes routine instead of remarkable, the cost of building in difficult places starts to change in a way that compounds over time. So let's go back to where this story started. The viral version says, China has drones lifting fully assembled tower cranes into the sky like toy helicopters. That literal claim is false. No drone on Earth is doing that. And it is not what is actually happening in Yunnan, Xinjiang, or Hubei. But the warning hiding underneath that exaggerated claim is not false at all. China is proving, project by project, province by province, that construction does not always have to begin on the ground. A drone bringing steel to a mountain tower. A drone lowering tools across a dangerous river. A drone melting ice off a power line before a worker ever has to climb it. A drone turning a site that used to be unreachable into a site that is simply scheduled, like any other delivery. The United States already proved this idea could work, more than a decade ago, in the hardest environment imaginable. It just never turned that proof into an everyday system the way China is doing right now. And as of 2025, America has finally started writing the rulebook that could change that. Which means this story is genuinely still open, not already decided. So here is the question I actually want to know your answer to. Was the bigger failure here a failure of technology or a failure of imagination about what a proven military tool could become in civilian life once the war that built it was over? Because those are two very different explanations, and depending on which one you believe, the lesson for what comes next is completely different too. Tell me where you land in the comments. I read all of them, and this is one of those debates where reasonable people genuinely disagree. And if this changed how you think about that viral clip, subscribe. Because the real story is almost never the flying machine itself. It's the system that gets built quietly around it, while everyone else is still watching the highlight reel.